Hi everyone, and welcome here to the National Gallery. My name is Simon Abrahams, and I'm the head of programming at the Wheeler Centre, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to Points of View, Australian Art Starting Conversations. We're taking 4 iconic works of art as a starting point of inspiration for 5 different speakers to talk about 5 different aspects of modern life. To tell us a bit about the artwork itself, and I promise you, he'll be the only one doing this tonight, would you welcome the head of conservation here at the National Gallery? He's an expert in paintings produced between 1850 and 1900, and he's the man responsible for the 2007 conservation of Shearing the Rams for the Australian Impressionism exhibition here at the National Gallery of Victoria. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join with me in welcoming Mr. Michael Varcoe-Cocks?
Yes, look, I'm going to briefly introduce the artist and talk about some of the aspects of the painting. One of the most obvious things I'm going to point out is that, like many artists of his generation, Tom Roberts was not born in Australia, but born in Dorchester, England in 1856. At the age of 12, following the death of his father, he immigrated to Australia with his mother and the fellow siblings, and they settled in the working class suburb of Collingwood. At the young age of 17, now a young man, he'd sort of developed a passion for art and he enrolled in the local schools of design, which was a really important and influential technical education program that was established throughout the 19th century. But following his early development there, he progressed to the, in a sense here, to the National Gallery of Victoria's School of Design, which was actually almost footsteps away from where the Wheeler Centre is currently located. And then eventually moved on through the ranks and got to the School of Painting, which was under the stewardship of Eugene von Gerard. So there he made lifelong friends. One who'd become his future wife, but also a small band of male painters, including Charles Douglas Richardson and, of course, Frederick McCubbin, who I'm sure you're all familiar with. They were driven and they were politically active. They advocated for reform in an under-resourced institution, to which in their minds provided inflexible and out-of-date academic methods of teaching. Their opposition to authority and the public comment through which they used through newspapers saw them temporarily expelled from the school, just like all good art students should try to strive for. Although readmitted, Roberts ultimately left and departed for England in 1881. Here he enrolled in the Royal Academy of Arts in London and also travelled through Spain, Italy and Paris, where he observed and participated in modern artistic movements and studied contemporary art in major collections and public collections, as well as, of course, just exhibitions of contemporary artists. So a really significant and important time for him to develop ideas beyond, I won't say the limited, but a more reduced colonial experience that was available to him in Australia. But significantly, and this is significant, he chose to return to Australia in 1885, and so doing he provided much vigour into the local cultural life of Melbourne. His drive, his professionalism, and his collegial nature rallied a group of artists who together formed the nucleus of what would become the Australian variant of Impressionism. The principles they held highest were truth to nature, or authenticity to the subjects they took, expressed through an immediate and poetic response. And I think you see that in this painting here, which I'll get to. So by 1888, Tom Roberts was 32 years old. He established himself as a major artist in Melbourne, including having a really prominent sort of portrait painter, and so was engaged in many facets of artistic life, which we don't have time to explore, but it involved, as all artistic practices do, everything from music through to poetry and things like that. In 1888 was also an important year, of course, because its national centennial celebrations were rampant around all of Australia, but particularly in Melbourne, which hosted the Centennial International Exhibition. And this major exhibition, which was at the exhibition buildings, had 2 million visitors attend, something we'd all aspire to at an institution like this. I'm almost afraid to mention it in case our director has ideas. But to me, it's really amazing. And the nature of the exhibition is that there were courts of that showcased recent developments in technologies and scientific manufacturing, all sorts of things, as well as galleries of art. And so these collections of galleries of art from various countries, of course, really set up an interesting dialogue for local artists about seeing, of course, works from overseas, but also trying to really work out at this important year of 1888 what it meant to be an Australian artist and what it meant to make an Australian painting. So it was in this environment that Roberts conceived a project that was a contemporary approach to the historical subject pictures that he'd seen in Europe. It was going to be a unique Australian painting and a painting of national significance that drew inspiration from celebrated realist painters that he'd seen overseas, particularly people like Millet and Bastien Lepage, whose heroic depictions of working class individuals held much favour with the younger generation of artists. So, in spring 1888, so shortly after the closure of the exhibition, Roberts visited his friends and apparently also family members at Brockleby Station in Cora, New South Wales, which is on the Riverina. And that's the depiction we're seeing here of the shearing shed of the station. Throughout the shearing season, he made over 70 preliminary sketches, so studies on a variety of media, recording the detail and working features of the shearing shed. He then came back to Melbourne and had a very active year. He was, as I said, he was very politically active, and in 1897 there was a very, very important exhibition which they called the Australian. Well, it was the Impressionist exhibition, the 9x5 Impressions exhibition, where they tackled the notion of what it was to be an Impressionist painter, and they sort of announced themselves to the public as such. He then returned, I won't go into great details, but we presume, of course, he worked on this composition, and he's conceived it, he's seen it, he's been in the shed, he's been working away, and we presume he's then begun the painting in some form in his studio, which was at Grosvenor Chambers up the top of Collins Street. So he returned with a 4x6 foot canvas to this location, took it up, I guess, on the train as far as he could, and then probably, I guess they got a cart. I don't know how they did it. It's interesting in itself. And then he literally occupied a corner of the wool shed and painted in situ to capture the detail and the energy of the scene. So to the left, we see beyond the dividing wall, there are penned rams, so penned in, held in anticipation of being sheared. You can see them on the far left there. They're sort of just the little heads are sort of popping up, and as well as a rouseabout who's entering carrying a freshly shorn fleece. While down the line, the shearers manhandled difficult and dangerous rams, and that was the whole point of the shearing of rams. It's different to shearing sheep. It's a complex, difficult things, and there's a lot of things at stake. There's the health of the shearer, and there's also the very important health of the ram, which has particular assets that can produce income into the future beyond their fleece. I think I summed it up the right way. In the middle of the composition, reciprocating our gaze, is the tar boy, whose job it was to respond to inadvertent cuts in the animals. So the tar boy is the one who's sort of holding looks like a broom. It's actually a stick that goes into tar. But the boy was in fact the daughter of a local stockman who Roberts had paid sixpence to sweep up dust and create a haze of atmospheric effect in the wool shed while he painted. So this impressive illusion of space. Oh, actually, I might just mention that along the walls, along the right-hand side walls, there's all the sort of facets of shearing. That he's really trying to document and create a document about the shearing process. He was obviously fascinated by it. He was a city slicker, but he's trying to document more than just the people and what's there. So if you look closely, there's things like bottles of oil hanging on the wall, which are the bright yellow things, which are used for sharpening shears, and there's other bits of sharpening stones. It's hard to see at the very back. There's also a press for pressing down the wool. So the impressive illusion of space which he's created is based on this single point perspective. So it's hard to sort of describe, but if you follow any line of the structure of the painting, you'll end up in one spot. So this is a very formal and academic process that he learned while he was overseas. It's, not by any means it's just a common trick of picture making, but it's a very formal and strange process to approach in an inspiration of the setting. Which introduces a complex tension between the academic formality of the painting obtained through the in situ and impressionistic principles that he's trying to hang on to. So there's two sort of things going on there. The painting is created with a broad, loose brushwork, and it's this wonderful sense of heat is created through a vermilion tint populated throughout the whole composition. And I won't go into it, but there's all sorts of you might notice little things. I'll give one hint, which is the three blue shirts of the people in the middle distance is sort of very carefully worked out. It's a very complex and very careful and constructed painting achieved through the physical act of painting in the shed. So quite amazing. When it was first exhibited, the painting received a strong public admiration and was noted for its distinctive Australian character. Letters appeared in the local papers urging that the painting be purchased by the National Gallery of Victoria. I guess I'm representing them here. But despite this pressure, it didn't happen. So it was instead sold to a stock and land agent called Edward Trenchard for 350 guineas, so quite a large sum, and it hung in his office and then stayed in the family for many, many years until in 1931 the artist died. Unfortunately, Tom Roberts died, and the painting appeared in a commemorative exhibition, and the Felton Bequest purchased it from that exhibition for the NGV. So since that time, it's remained on public display and it's become part of the Australian visual vernacular. It's repeatedly referenced in high art and popular forms of culture. Each year, over 40,000 school children, this is just the school children, over 40,000 school children visit the NGV galleries and see this painting. In May 1890, when the painting was first shown, it was stated in the local paper Table Talk that Shearing the Rams is a work that will live and a work which will Roberts's name will always be remembered. And I think we're about to find out that that's actually true. Thank you.